So today's video is about the disappearance of a 12-year-old girl who went missing from her middle school in 1975. The case remained cold for 14 years before a break came when an interview with one of the world's most notorious serial killers was interviewed in 1989. To this day, no one knows the true story of what happened. So today, come join me as we discuss the case of 12-year-old Lynette Dawn Culver. This one's interesting.
There should be no law against killing people.
This morning, the state put to death Paul Ezra Rhodes.
7 years ago today, a Pocatello woman was murdered, and that case remains unsolved.
Our first victim is going to be Cassie Stoddard. She's going to be alone in a big, dark house out in the middle of nowhere. How perfect can you get?
Gathered tonight in Pocatello to show support for the family of 11-year-old Jerilee Underwood.
So Lynette Dawn Culver was born July 31st of 1962 in Seattle, Washington. Her parents relocated the family to the small town of Pocatello, Idaho, because they believed it was safer than the big city of Seattle. Now, Lynette was described by friends and family as loving, friendly, with a bit of a rebellious streak. On May 5th of 1975, when she was 12 years old, Lynette got up and went to school without saying anything to her mom or her dad or the rest of her family. The reason why was because she had had a fight with her mom the night previous and had made a comment to her mom, you know, what if I never returned? What if I just disappeared and never came back? So she left for school and was seen for the first half of her school day. At lunch, people reported seeing her leave the school, Alameda. At the time, it was Alameda Junior High. Now it's Alameda Middle School. Same school, they just rebranched it. They don't refer to them as junior highs anymore. They're now middle schools. And there's two stories behind what Lynette was actually doing. Some say she had left because she didn't care for the cafeteria food at the school and was walking home to get some food that she actually enjoyed, having only lived just a few blocks from the school. The other theory was that she was leaving the school to actually go meet a friend for lunch off school grounds. She hasn't been seen since. Alameda Middle School. This was originally Alameda Junior High School. 1975, this was the school of Lynette Culver, who lives literally just around the corner, or used to live around the corner, not too far, just off of Eubanks and Eldridge. Now, a guy named Captain Borax did a fantastic video on this area, and Lynette lived just right over there off of Fairbanks. And people said that when she would leave, she would come out that door right over there and walk across. Now, that chain link fence you see over there didn't exist at the time. That was all wide open, that she would walk across heading to her home. Now, at the time, there were several children and a bus driver that stated that Lynette had boarded a bus around noon or a little later at a different junior high on a field trip to the Fort Hall Indian Reservation, where many of Lynette's friends and her older sister's friends lived on the reservation, or the res as they call it, and that she got on the bus, and several kids and the bus driver reported seeing Lynette get on the bus. Well, when she didn't return to class for the second half, obviously people began to worry. So they started questioning, and when this information came around, the school went and located the class that had gone on this field trip to the reservation. And they started looking for Lynette. Well, they found a girl that both the children and the bus driver identified as Lynette Culver. Well, it turned out that was not the female. While they looked very similar to each other, the young girl they identified was of Native American descent and more than likely was living on the reservation. But nobody can say for sure. This is all speculative at this point. Lynette was never found, and quickly she was listed by the police department, by the Pocatello Police Department, as a runaway. Because of the fight she had had with her parents the night before, she was officially listed as a runaway, and not much thought was put into her disappearance. But I did find out there's another YouTuber who actually lives here in Las Vegas who did a video about Lynette Culver. His name is Captain Borax, and I actually watched his video on Lynette Culver, and it's very, very in-depth. If you get a chance, I'll link his video in the description. And I actually spoke with Captain Borax about his findings, and he was very gracious enough to give me access to certain things and give me some information. And what I did learn was that one of Lynette's neighbors was a police detective, a man by the name of Al Kuda, who was also the detective and officer assigned to protect John Fitzgerald Kennedy, when he arrived in Pocatello during his campaign of 1960. And Kennedy was not a sitting president. I hear a lot of this. At the time, they were like, oh no, he was the sitting president when he visited. He was not the sitting president. He was campaigning for the presidency against Richard Nixon at the time. He would later win that bid by a very narrow margin. I think it was like 500,000 votes or something, but just a very narrow margin he won against Nixon. And he took office in 1961. But at the time, Kuda, who was a very devout Republican, support for Kennedy, and really believed Kennedy would do great things for the country. But Kuda was the only one that actually took Lynette Culver's disappearance seriously. He really believed that there was more to this than just a runaway, and he actually really went in depth into the investigation and trying to find out what happened to Lynette. He didn't believe she was a runaway. He knew the family and he knew Lynette. So the first theory is that she boarded that bus to the reservation and somehow met with foul play, or was possibly was part of a human trafficking ring, and that's the reason for her disappearance. Second theory would come in the form of a break in 1989, and that was when the Attorney General's Office of Idaho sent law enforcement representatives from Idaho to Florida State Penitentiary to interview a man about his connections to possible disappearances and murders in Idaho. And this was just hours before he was set to be executed by the state of Florida. And this man really doesn't need any introduction, but he has become known as one of the most prolific serial killers in not only U.S. history, but in world history. And that man's name was Theodore Ted Bundy. And Ted would go on to tell things to the detectives that would leave them and the small Idaho community stunned.
stayed in a Holiday Inn in Pocatello.
It was basically to do what was done.
Abducted a young girl from a junior high school.
I encountered her at a time when she was leaving the school grounds to meet someone at lunchtime. The name of the young lady. But she was in her early teens, long brown hair, wearing blue jeans is about all I can remember for sure. She made a comment indicating that either she lived with her grandmother or the grandmother lived with her family. Another comment indicating that perhaps they were thinking of moving to another house. She was wearing a jacket of some kind, but nothing really loud color. It wasn't a bright color. A pullover, blue jeans, and shoes, not boots, but shoes of some in the river, probably the Snake River.
Now, what Bundy would go on to tell detectives is that he had arrived in Pocatello that May of 1975, and he was on what he described as a hunting trip. Bundy had actually admitted that he had gone to the women's dormitory at Idaho State University, where he planned on carrying out a sick fantasy. Well, he was actually stopped. What he says, he was actually stopped by, he didn't say who, he just said authority figures. Now that could have been security, that could have been law enforcement, and kicked off the grounds. But this was, he admitted, was his first attempt to try to claim many victims in an area. What you see here is Turner Hall. This is the female dorms here at Idaho State University. And this is where Ted Bundy admitted to trying to claim multiple victims. He tried to take out as many female victims as he possibly could. But he was shooed away by some male authority, most likely security. Now, Bundy didn't succeed here, but he did succeed later on at the Chi Omega house in Florida State University. But he admitted he did this the night before he took Lynette Culver.
Well, Mustangs are, there are
amazing.
cars out there that are considered.
The next day, Bundy admitted that he got up and he specifically went out early looking for a victim. He claims that he did not have a specific victim in mind. He just knew the urge to kill was there and he needed to satisfy it. Now, not much information is out. The majority of the interview that Bundy gave has not been released, but there are snippets of it. And that right there, my friends, was the home of Lynette Culver. That was her home right there. Could not recall Lynette's name, but he did go on to identify clothing that was very similar and gave personal information about Lynette and her family's living situation that Lynette's parents truly believed that he would not have known unless he had actually come in contact with Lynette. Now, he never describes how he actually got her into the car, whether she got into the car willingly or whether she was forced. Most detectives believe that he probably used his famous police officer ruse, flashed a badge and asked what she was doing and why she was out of school, and convinced her to get into the car and that he would take her back to the school, and that's how he lured her in. But again, that's all speculation. It's conjecture. We're not sure, but that's what the police actually believe. Now, he never actually says it on the tape or any portion of the tape that's been released, but the police officers that interviewed the Bundy actually forgot to ask him how he had killed Lynette. And so they were actually driving toward the airport in Florida to come back to Idaho. And they actually called and got a hold of Bundy and said, how did you kill the girl there in Pocatello? And he said, I took her back to my hotel room, and after sexually assaulting her multiple times, I drowned her in the bathtub. Well, where did you dispose of her? And he said, well, he goes, I waited until after dark. He goes, and then was able to load her into my vehicle. And I drove her to a area where he disposed of the body in a body of water, which he said most likely the Snake River. Now, this location has never been fully identified because less than 24 hours later, Bundy would be executed. But there have been people, what I like to call Lokis or location investigators, such as myself, and police that have been able to put together some kind of, use the information and come up with an area that most likely, if he did murder her. And while I could not find it, if you watch the Captain Borek's documentary on this case that I've linked in the description, he actually shows the area where more than likely Lynette Dawn Culver was disposed of. What you see here, guys, is the Clarion Inn. It's what it currently stands as today. But in '75, this was a Holiday Inn. And one of its most notorious residents, or visitors, shall I say, was a man that some of you may know, a man by the name of Theodore Robert Bundy, aka Ted Bundy. Now, this is just off of Pocatello Creek Road. Perfect spot for Bundy, because as you can hear and see over here, this is the I-15 heading north and southbound. Quick and easy escape route for him to get out of town. So 1975, this back area you see right here, this is reportedly where Bundy stayed. It's very possible that one of these rooms right here is where Lynette Culver drew her last breath. Now, what Bundy said was that he had brought her back here, repeatedly sexually assaulted her before drowning her in the bathtub. But this is it, guys. This is now the Clarion Motel. Back then, it was a Holiday Inn. So for many, many, many years, because there was no body or anything, Lynette's memory just kind of more or less faded. And the city of Pocatello, just like Vicky Jo Quinn, decided to band together as they do often, and decided they needed a way to honor Lynette Culver's memory. So on July 31st, which would have been of 2019, which would have been Lynette Culver's 57th birthday, they unveiled a memorial bench at one of Lynette's favorite places, and that was Ross Park Aquatic Center. And they placed this beautiful bench in memory of Lynette Culver right there, and we're gonna go check that out right now. So I guess this part right here is considered Ross Park, along with that.
It says right there, welcome to Ross Park Aquatics Complex.
Yeah. Now this is considered the Pocatello Zoo, or Idaho Zoo.
This is Ross Park.
Yeah, this will always be Ross Park to me. Now it's got most of it sealed off. Some of the goats talking to us, telling us they don't want us around, obviously. Look at the little billy goat right there. Yeah, all right, you bad boy. But no more freebies. This is all closed off now. You have to pay to get in, huh?
It depends on if they're open or not. If they're not open, no.
And this is Ross Park. You ever seen anything like this, guy?
It's beautiful.
There's the bear enclosures right
Yeah, there's the...
It's nice to see some green for once.
I forgot how beautiful this place
Watch out
is.
for groundhog holes.
Okay.
This place has got groundhogs all over. Not really groundhogs, they're more like rock chucks because of obviously. But there are holes.
And there's the
all over.
cages
You'll
for
see
the
'em.
animals. I know they got a bear and some jaguars and mountain lions up here.
So don't step in one.
But I really forgot how beautiful this area was. Wow. Kick your ass.
He's from Vegas and he doesn't get up here very often. I wanted to grab some.
So this is the bench of Lynette Dawn Culver.
Stay away from the elf chap in the
Supposedly the one of two victims here in Idaho of Ted Bundy.
Yeah, they did a good job on that. Yeah, they did. It's beautiful.
I was reading about this up there and almost started crying.
Is this the family that did this? Or is this
No, this was the city of Pocatello.
Yeah, the city and the family coming here and they had a big nice.
They dedicated this to what would have been her 56th birthday. This is beautiful. So what do you think? Do you think that Lynette was the one that boarded that bus at the middle school and to the res and got caught up in a human trafficking ring? Or chose to disappear and just has refused to come out of hiding? A true victim of Ted Bundy? We'll never probably really ever know for sure. With Bundy's execution and the passing of several of the original law enforcement officers that were involved, the chances that we'll ever fully know what happened to Lynette Culver is slim to none. But there's always hope. And keeping Lynette's memory alive is what's important. There is a third theory that people have come up with. And they believe that Lynette was the victim of a serial killer, but not Ted Bundy. They believe through the disappearance and murders of several young females, with most of them attending Alameda High School, the same school Lynette did, throughout the 70s and early 80s, was the work of a shadow serial killer that was never taken serious. And that serial killer has infamously been dubbed the Snake River serial killer. But that's a story for another time. Thank you for joining me today. And we're going to learn more about the presence of the Snake River serial killer on the next and final Gem State Stories. Until then, as always, we'll see you on the next one. And deuces.